Namaste, people. Welcome to the show Get Set Green. I'm your host, Pooja R V. And in today's System Shaper episode, we have well known established author, LCA practitioner, and a sustainability expert who is Mary Ann here with us today. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. And she has published a lot of articles, journals, and also books. And she has spent her a lot of many years in understanding the critical methodology part of how LCA actually works and what are all the applications for the same. So today we will deep dive into understanding the whole part of how this will help in us being more sustainable in the coming days. So thanks, Mary. And my first question to you is, can you help us understand your whole journey where you are part with, let's say, the research laboratories for US CPA, and then you also had your experience working in private sector as well. So if you can share your journey with us,
Okay,
that
I'd be
would be
glad
great.
to. I'll try not to make this too long because my journey has been a rather long one, a very surprising one, actually, because I worked in the US EPA's Office of Research and Development for 32
Mm-hmm.
years. And the first 8 years, I was in waste management and treatment things. And suddenly I got in this area called pollution prevention, which is a whole new field for me. And then by surprise, Jim Fava, who's also well known in the LCA field, came to visit our laboratory with a gentleman from Procter and Gamble, and they talked to me about this new notion. I don't know if we used the word life cycle assessment at the time, but it was a concept that was bouncing around Europe with the greening of the environment. And I said, that sounds really interesting. And so I supported the development of the first guidance manual in America on life cycle inventory assessment, because at the time, that's kind of where we were limited to collecting the input-output data. So back in 1990, the EPA came out with like the first document that said life cycle assessment. Um, and from there, we didn't know where it was going to go, but it just held so much promise. And eventually the ISO standards started to be developed. And that's where things really took off. So you had before the standards, then after. And once we had the ISO standards, said, okay, this is what life cycle assessment means. And that's where the term was really coined and people started to use it. Um, so from 1990 on, I was just all into life cycle assessment things and kind of did it outside of what the EPA was into, because the EPA is very much about their silos, the air, the water, the solid waste. LCA, as you know, is cross media. It's bringing all those things together. And so there wasn't really a home for it at the EPA very well, but I managed to kind of do my thing. And it worked out very well. I retired from the EPA at the end of 2012, and it was a really good time because then they restructured the Office of Research and Development. And I don't know if you've heard, they've pretty much done away with it. So the group that I was in, the Sustainable Technology Division, was dismantled. There really isn't any place for real sustainability at the EPA, from what I understand. They're very much focused just on research about those silos. So as far as policy, at least at the EPA, it's not there. But I was able to create several technical books, as you mentioned. And
Yeah.
it's not that I authored them. I know the smart people, the right people in the field, and I edited several books. And I want to say thank you to all those chapter authors that helped contribute to those. So I had several books I came out with. And then the latest effort, again, once I retired, I worked with the late Professor Walter Klupfer on
Mm-hmm.
creating the LCA Compendium, which is
Yeah.
a 10 volume series. And it was kind of his vision. I look at it his legacy, and maybe my legacy now too, to come up with this compendium that captures everything about LCA, from based on the LCA standards, inventory, impact, interpretation, all that, but then a whole bunch on applications. So we have published 7 of those volumes to date. I have 2 more that are in process right now, one on LCA and innovation and industry, and life cycle sustainability assessment. And then the last one, which I'm just getting started, is on LCA applications, and we're calling it research and policy. So that's kind of a working title for right now. So once I get that one done, that'll be the complete 10-volume set. So that's what keeps me busy. I'm still somewhat involved with LCA through publishing. I used to do reviews of LCA studies. but I quit doing that because I was kind of out of the research field and felt I was a bit dated with my information. But still, to contribute to the publishing world is very fulfilling, and I enjoy doing this. And don't know what comes after that, but that's where I am right now.
Yeah, and I would say this feels so fantastic journey to have for anyone, coming from research and understanding it, and also contributing to scientific community in terms of helping them understand this methodology. Let's say along with the contribution of namely few other authors in this industry and as well as cross sector wise. I feel so happy to even listen to the story, and I am myself has also been a beneficiary of these books which you're already mentioning, because I have already three of them with me. So to understand this whole process for the listener who is listening for the first time, if you feel the technical words are written lacking in Latin to you, let me just help you by saying that LCA is nothing but life cycle assessment, where you try to understand from a life cycle thinking point of view for any product, or it can be any service, what is the overall, let's say, the environmental impact from that particular product or the process, is what LCA is basically trying to address. That is the key component which you should understand. And let's say if you would like to know more or understand this in depth, you should definitely check out her books or compendiums which she already mentioned now. And moving on, Mary, you are also mentioning about this ISO standards development, and then we also had this, like, the LCA term was not coined as well, right? So if you see the evolution of this sustainability journey, could you help us, share your point of view on how one led to another? What is the story behind this? If you could help us understand.
Yeah, the point I'd like to emphasize, I think I'm answering your question, but you keep saying the words life cycle thinking, which I've heard a lot over the years. And at one point, I had to sit down and go, "Well, why is it I'm seeing so many people that are coming up with reports?" And they said, "Well, we use life cycle thinking," and they'll produce something very quickly. I'm like, a true LCA, because you collect so much data. What I call my input. I'm a chemical engineer by training. My bachelor's in chemical engineering, so that's what I go back to. So I say input, output data. What goes in comes out. So it's a lot. If you're talking about from acquisition of the raw materials from the earth, processing it, manufacturing it, distributing it, the the user uses it, it's end of life, it either gets recycled, whatever, so that's your life cycle. That's a lot of data, right? And I began this journey back when we were doing all this on spreadsheets. And sometimes the spreadsheets would just get so large that it would just collapse on itself. So
Yeah.
what the real change came when we had computers, obviously, in Excel, and selling things got much easier. Now with AI, I mean, that could be a whole nother conversation we could have, but AI, I think, is just going to make this take off even more. But I would see studies done and they do it so quick. I'm like, how can you do an LCA that fast? And I realized that there's a difference in what I consider a true life cycle assessment, which is why I said cradle to grave, input, output, looking at all the impacts that you can quantify. When somebody's doing life cycle thinking, sometimes they'll say, "Well, I'm looking at the beginning and the end, but I'm just picking out where in there I'm interested, either the one impact I'm interested in, or the activity I'm interested in." So that's kind of life cycle thinking, which, you'd be commended for at least opening your boundaries and looking beyond just production. But to me, I'm kind of a purist when it comes to, the ISO standard, cradle to grave, all the
Mm-hmm.
impacts. So and I've kind of seen maybe not so much an evolution, but a devolution of the term, because climate change has taken such a front seat in all this, which
Yeah.
rightfully so. I mean, that's a huge problem. But now I'm seeing a
Yeah.
lot of studies that they are going cradle to grave. They're only looking at greenhouse gas emissions, climate change impact, which is great. Again, you can't fault those studies. But as a true LCA practitioner, I would say, but if you are making a change because of that impact, what are the possible trade-offs that you're what are the consequences of that thing? So LCA is not going to make the decision, but it's a decision support tool. I think
Yeah.
that's also something important to understand, that
Yeah.
you can run through these numbers and you'll have a bunch of numbers. It's not going to say, here's the answer. It's going to say,
Yeah.
if you make this decision, what could happen from that? So that's I see that part still kind of being embraced by people.
Yeah, and I also like the part where you mentioned, right? It helps you make a. It is a decision, not a direct tool which will tell you this is what you are supposed to do. It is an aid for a decision making process altogether. Whether it is for academia or let's say for business. And also, I was interested in understanding, Mary, if you can help me here, the LCI inventory part, right? As you mentioned, the data is quite important to make sense of the result of any LCA study. So, what is your opinion or the effort behind the LCI data? Because still now, I feel the industry has this big obstacle to address, which is the lack of primary data, or in certain scenarios, it can also be the region wise data, not let's say the availability as well as the temporal part. How long is it valid? So, there are these two parts which the industry is still trying to tackle on and to better understand. So, how do you see the creation of LCI inventory part, let's say
Yeah,
for a country level? Would that be solving this problem?
yeah, you've hit on, I think, the biggest issue with life cycle assessment, and it's the data availability to get good quality data. And one thing I wanted to mention, that in that volume, I hate to drone on about my compendium series, but the book that's under process now on LCA innovation in industry, I included a chapter that's based on a survey that I conducted recently. This is something I wanted to do a long time ago, but I couldn't do it while I was still in the government because there was too much red tape involved. But I wanted to survey the people I called the LCA pioneers, those of us that were there back at the beginning, and say, okay, you've seen it evolve over the years. How do you see it today? Is it good? Is it bad? What are the weaknesses? What could be done better? So I sent the survey to 40 people, got responses from 18. It was kind of sad because a few people had passed away in the meantime. So we're talking about quite a few years, that have gone by. But the results were really interesting, and I put this into a book chapter that'll be with this new book coming out. The main thing that everybody commented was, we still need quality data. That is still the one hurdle to get over. And I don't have, I mean, nobody had really a solution to offer for that. Like, I was hoping people would say, "Well, maybe we can do this or that," but I don't know. That's always been the hurdle. Maybe that's why, because nobody knows how to get there, especially if we don't have, like, the American government that's backing this idea. They're not going to want to put money into creating a database for it. I mean, they do already have a lot of databases that offer good kinds of data, like eGrid, things like that, but nothing that's really catered toward the LCA practitioner. So I don't know, can't help you with that one right now, but that is still a main barrier to getting good LCAs out.
Yeah. And if I have to ask, the second limitation to this also would be in terms of the methodology, right? We don't have a clear cut, let's say, final universal way of approaching any LCA study. We have multiple methodologies available. We have, let's say, multiple softwares with different databases available. So it becomes difficult if you have to compare one study to another. So, what is the better way to address this limitation for LCA in today's world?
That's a really good question, and that made me think about my participation in helping develop the ISO standards. Because going into that, I was, and I don't think I'm the only one, hoping that we would come out the end with, here's how you do LCA. But
Hmm.
as we got into it, there were so many universities and practitioners, consultants involved. And at one point, they said, "Well, we want a flexible standard." It's like, what's a flexible standard? And that's kind of what happened at the end. It's like it definitely set the boundaries, or it gave you a definition, but it never said step one, step two, step three.
Yeah.
And until we have that, yeah, there's still going to be a lot of variability. I if an ISO process can't get us there, I don't know what else could be done to get
Hmm.
more narrowed down into the process. But again, going back to, but if LCA is all about decision support, as long as you understand the assumptions that go into the study and you can check the data, maybe it's not so important that everybody has the exact same method to move forward.
Yeah, and let's say, when we have this overall result of any LCA study, we will have the method chosen in terms of what is the desired outcome we are expecting from that particular LCA study. Mary, you might have seen a lot of, let's say, LCAs which you have already performed and understood as well. So, what is your take on having multiple categories also involved? Because as of now, the key factor which people are focusing on is climate change. Of course, there are other impact categories which we will touched on based on the type of the study which the practitioner is performing. So, what is your take on having an LCA study with all of the environmental impact categories or focusing more on climate change? How do you see those developments?
I think I might have already touched on that a bit because I am seeing more studies focusing on climate change. And as
Yeah.
I said, it's an important thing right now. It's good to do that. But I talked to Mark Goodcoop at Prey Sustainability one time, and I asked him about that. I said, when a client comes to you and they just want to do a climate change study, yet LCA is supposed to be more than that. And he said, well, it's a good starting point. You say to them, yes, we can do that for you. But for a little bit more, let's show you the rest. And you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of work them toward that and maybe that's the best way to do it, open the door with that. But I think the whole idea behind life cycle assessment is to look at potential consequences, trade-offs against all the impacts. And if you don't do that, you're missing out. There's also a similar thing that happened, I maybe not so much these days, but people would look at the cradle and go to gate, cradle to gate. So the end of the production, once it goes out the door to the consumer, that's where they put their boundaries. And again, that's useful for the producer, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. And I think manufacturers are now realizing that if there's any impact anywhere along the chain, that could possibly come back and impact them, right? So I think a lot of product manufacturers are embracing the value of looking holistically at their operations. And that's why I'm seeing a lot more activity in product manufacturing and industry than I am in policy making.
Yeah, and since you mentioned about policy making, Mary, can you help us understand how a result from LCA study or life cycle sustainability assessments can help business make better decisions?
Oh, let me see if I can answer that. How can industry make better decisions? I don't know if I can answer that. I just know that the information from an LCA will, again, going back to decision support, they might think this is what we need to do. We need to recycle more, either use more recycled content or make our product recyclable. Sounds good. That's that circular economy idea. But if you do the LCA and you say, oh, but in doing that, I'm going to have to transport my product. That means a lot more energy. Means a lot more water. What is all that? Like and then how will that impact not just me, but everybody along the product chain? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that manufacturers are starting to embrace that idea and understand it. Again, I hate to be pessimistic. I just didn't see that same love for the idea when I was with the EPA. Again, they're so focused on their media that they're interested in that that's all they want to look at. So I'm not sure how to change that. It would be nice if we could physically tear down the silos and get people to work together. But I'm seeing things moving in the opposite direction. The silos are becoming stronger, and I just don't know what to do about that.
And yeah, that also brings to my next question in understanding, let's say, in of all the documents or ISO standards which are already existing today, like do we see a requirement for, let's say, some more rigid ones, or let's say having a flexible ones, as you already mentioned, like how can we have this flexible in nature as a ISO standard? So if we have to address this discrepancies or let's say the I'm not getting the right word. How do I say the crystal clear understanding for the practitioner? What are all the key details which it should involve?
You're asking what are the key details in getting to a more
Yeah, which
structured
like the
methodology?
gap for existing ones, since they are flexible. Let's say if we have to make it much more better, clear for with more granular details for them, how would that be?
I don't know if we can ever settle on one single methodology because there are just different assumptions that can go into it. So I believe that the best thing we could do is have clear assumptions in the method and the approach that we do. You know what I'm saying? It's like eh, as long as and this is hard because it's not a clear cut, as somebody reading the study, I just want to go, which is better, right? But you have to go underneath that and say, well, what were the assumptions that went into that? And if I can use like an analogy, data centers, I'm not sure, I'm assuming this could be a worldwide problem. Across America, data centers are being built and installed. And communities everywhere are in an uproar because, like, I've heard it uses so much water. I heard it uses so much energy and drives up the prices. And so then the question is, how much water does it take to send, say, to do a chat GPT message, right? Well, the answer to that depends. And this is kind of like a running joke, sort of a joke in the LCA community, that our answer is always, it depends. And so it depends on your assumptions.
Yeah,
It
or more
depends,
of
right?
a consultant way of saying things. Yeah, it depends on the
Yeah,
case
it just
scenarios. Yeah.
depends. It's funny. I just said this yesterday to a friend. I said, it's so funny after all these years, we're still saying, well, it depends. But that's just the nature of LCA because it's so broad. There's just so many assumptions. And then you've got the whole attributional versus consequential modeling aspect. And there's a big, I think, still a big divide. I believe a lot of people in Europe think consequential is the only way to go. In America, it's more you start with attributional, see where you are, and then you look at the consequences, go to consequential analysis. Again, that's a huge difference in the kind of the data that you use. So I don't know if we're going to get to a single method because there are just so many different approaches. But to be very transparent in your methodology, I think is the best we can do at this point.
Yeah, I think that is also a problem which we will have to carry with LCA being in place. That is one of the limitations, is how I see about that. And Mary, can we also understand, let's say, from your experience, if you had any case scenario or a challenging study which you would like to share with us?
Well, one, I might be talking at a school, but I've been away from the EPA for many years now. So the one that hits home for me was we really didn't conduct a lot of LCAs in house when I was in the Office of Research and Development, but we did have a chance to look at MTBE in gasoline because at the time it was a big problem. It was leaking into the ground and contaminating groundwater. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take a whole lot of MTBE to mess up a whole water supply. And so we looked at this additive to gasoline and did an LCA. But at the end of it, we found out that the amount of MTBE was so small that it wasn't really even registering as a significant impact when we used the Tracy model. I don't know if you're familiar with Tracy. It was something
Yeah, I have
created. Yeah,
used it.
yes, from
Yes.
my yeah, you've used it. That's great.
Mm.
Um, but I can't remember now. I think it was mostly water issues that were like a bigger impact. And I'm trying to think. And so we took the results to the Office of Air Quality and Planning because I think MTB was helping with the air emissions. And we said, yes, but you're creating this water issue. And they basically said, well, that's not of interest to us. We're the air office, you know? And so we were not allowed to publish that final report because it was done for the Office of Air. They didn't like the findings. I think I can say
Mm-hmm.
it that way. And so we never went. And so after 4 years of working on the study, we weren't allowed to share any of the results because it didn't match with what the EPA's office wanted to do. So
Yeah.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, let's say, if you had any difficult one or you had something, let's say, we always have this bias, right? When we have this product, our understanding, inherent understanding will be like this can be the possible impact, which will sometimes it might turn out altogether totally different than how we were intending it to be. So that's what I was also looking at. And this gives me a nice perspective, right? Sometimes there is a very, let's say, less what you can do as a practitioner because the person or the organization or let's say even the governments, what they're looking at, what is their scope of the study and how they want it to be addressed. So we will have this, let's say, ambiguity in understanding how do we actually want to carry out the study. So yeah, that's nice. And we are at the end of the, let's say, session, and we have the rapid fire round for you. So you will have a few questions for which you will have to give us one word answers.
Okay.
So are we ready for that?
I'll do my best.
Yes. So carbon footprint or water footprint?
Carbon footprint.
Okay. LCA in one word.
Holistic.
Holistic. Oh, good one. And one sustainability myth you would like to burst.
Recycling.
Okay. Circular economy or net zero?
Net zero.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And this conversation helped us understand, let's say, the deeper understanding of how LCA should look like and also what are all the limitations which are existing currently today while executing an LCA study. Thank you so much for your time. And if you like the episode, please do share it with others for whom this might be useful if they are in sustainability sector. Thanks for listening, and we will have next episode next week. So until then, bye.